that point. Where is the point of action? Where? There. Okay. So, as a country and as a region, if you are able to implement the African that you're looking forward to, so that we are able to industrialize by the year 2030 for Kenya, and also to achieve the vision of Africa, which is 2063. And we are looking at the workforce. What is critical for us is looking at what we call workforce planning. And workforce planning will go together with succession management, so that as we develop our people, then the young people are also developed so that they're able to take over when the senior people retire. We're also looking at encouraging and continuing to advocate for nuclear safety culture. And this is going to be developed right from the agency level, going to the policy makers and with our leaders, so that all the things that we do, we have safety in mind. That inquisitive mind where you're always asking, what is it that will go wrong when we are doing our designs, when you're doing our constructions, and also when you're doing operations. So we are also looking at enhancing compliance, of course, with our regulatory body. They are able to regulate our affairs, and therefore the capacity building in that particular regard will be critical as we move forward to having a very transparent and accountable regulator that is able to regulate the affairs of the owner operator. And also in terms of management and leadership, we are looking at developing the competencies of our various leaders, both at the national level, at the corporate level, and also at the agency level, so that we move with these numbers as we look forward to deploying the first nuclear power. What is critical to us also is how to retain, and this is something that we have realized in Kenya and also in Africa, that we are losing a lot of our competent staff after having trained them to other countries, and this is a risk that we have already established, and we are looking forward to ensuring that we are able to develop them, we are able to retain them, we are able to motivate them, so that as we look forward to 2034 for Kenya and other countries in Africa coming on board, then we should be able to have these people on board to develop our nuclear power program. We also making very good progress in terms of now developing the national nuclear curriculum. This will involve all aspects of nuclear engineering and nuclear science, and we'll be making progress with other countries that have done this before, and the US is very clear on this. And also in terms of the strategy, which we want to look at the national strategy for the nuclear power program, that we are able to see how many numbers we have in the various aspects, the various areas of nuclear power program. We're also going to train training of trainers, so that then these trainers can be able to pass on the baton and the information that is required for purposes of training our nuclear experts. We also want to establish, and this is on course, at Consult Technopolis, Kenya Institute of Advanced Technology, and this would be a very excellent center for training nuclear scientists, nuclear engineers, and we are looking forward to commissioning this by the year 2026. Of course, we cannot overemphasize the importance of collaboration and cooperation. And this is when we are looking forward to many countries like the US, South Korea, China, Japan, and many other countries that already have nuclear power programs, so that we can always engage with them on matters that makes our work easier in terms of competency development. So I think that would then mark our perspective. We continue to develop these competencies, and we hope that as the time nears by 2034 for Kenyan case, these numbers that we continue to develop would move towards 200 and to 300 so that we can have some confidence in developing the nuclear power program that we're looking forward to. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. So Eric had mentioned the number of staff and the size of the workforce that's needed for the nuclear program. And I think my next question, when we get back to my presentation, will be surrounding that. So I want you to think about what is the total number of workers? What's the size of the workforce that we should be thinking about? I have a personal story first. And just a secret between you and me, I'm testing the IT people to make sure they're on the ball for the rest of this workshop. So far, doing A+, amazing job. So the picture on the left is quite funny to me. It was one of my first visits to a nuclear construction site, and that's actually a picture of me and Ms. Leah Lockridge, who will be facilitating the second workshop. And that was taken about 15 years ago, not quite, but it was taken a very long time ago, and early in the construction of Vogtle 3 and 4, which just came online and became operational in the U.S. last year and this year, which is very exciting for all of us. But I ended up working at a construction site in the United Arab Emirates at the Baraka APR 1400 4-unit site for 3 years, where I was in charge of, I was the deputy site manager for the Westinghouse scope at the Baraka plant in the UAE. And UAE is a very interesting country, and also their workforce development was very interesting because there just aren't a lot of Emirati people in general. A lot of the workforce and a lot of the population not in the UAE are expats. Only about 9 or 10% of the population in the country are Emirati people. So that came into play in the workforce of the Baraka site in a very interesting way. And they tended to have nuclear experts from every country around the world that has a nuclear program. And they all work together at the site on the same project. They had Americans, Canadians, Russians, South African, like anywhere there's nuclear plants, they had people from those countries that were at the site in UAE. And it was a really wonderful experience to see how they went from no nuclear expertise whatsoever to a very successful construction project with all 4 units being operational now. And I'll leave it at that, but I would love to have any questions that you have about that program as when we get to the Q&A portion of the discussion. So the question that I asked before, how many workers are needed during construction and operations phase? So let's think about, it's a little different answer for construction versus operations, but we'll talk about it once we get some numbers coming in. Because some of the numbers that I heard Engineer Oaxaca mentioned were about 20, looking at 200, and when we're talking about the engineering portion of the workforce, that's certainly relevant. But these numbers are good. I like that. So if we look at this, we can say the people that said 100 workers, order of magnitude, that's correct if we're talking about just engineering staff. During operation of the plant, when I worked at a 2-unit Westinghouse 4-loop PWR in New York called Indian Point as a reactor engineer, we had about 1,500 people that worked on site, and during outages it was around 3,000 people. Our population doubled during refueling outages. And I believe at the peak of construction at Baraka with all 4 units, there was about 25,000 people that were working at that site. It was a huge, huge, huge project. but I don't think most countries would make an attempt to build 4 units all at the same time in their first time building nuclear plants. It's a little bit ambitious. Okay, so when are the workers needed? It's really important to think about the timing of the workforce development and the timing of when those jobs will be available, because you don't want to train up people and then not have the jobs for them, because then they end up leaving, as Eric mentioned, and you don't want to have them sitting around either. They need to be ready at exactly the time that they're needed, which can be really complicated in one of the places where outsourcing and collaboration can come in and support. But you can get an idea here. The words are really small. Maybe you can see them on your phone a little bit better. But on the left-hand side, you have pre-construction. The next item is construction, and then operation testing and operations at the end. So you can see you need a tremendous amount of workers, and not necessarily skilled workers. Some of them may be skilled, maybe it just be laborers doing regular construction work, maybe pipe fitters. But these are the things that you need to think about, where those workers are going to come from, and how they can be ready at the time that they're needed for the work of the plant. Okay, I love this slide. Because this is really surprising to a lot of people. When we look at that piece of the pie that is for the engineering portion, it's pretty small in the dark blue section, 14%. And this is just a typical example. It can vary a little bit between plants and utilities. When I worked at an operating plant, I mentioned there were 1,500 people that worked there during normal operations. There were about 150 engineers that worked there, and of those 150 engineers, 6 of us were nuclear engineers. Out of 1,500 people, only 6 that worked at the power plant were nuclear engineers. So when you're thinking about developing your nuclear energy infrastructure, everybody immediately thinks about nuclear engineers. You don't need that many. You probably already have all of the nuclear engineers that you will need, unless you're going to be designing and developing your own reactor concept. Most countries tend to use a partner to develop their reactor technology, and I'll talk about that in collaborations. But it's really important to think about, there's all these other different types of jobs and people that we need to get excited about nuclear that aren't nuclear engineers. Not that I don't love nuclear engineers, of course, but we need other folks too. Okay. So let's talk about what are the existing workforces that are available, and what are some of the other resources that we can pull in for our workforce development here. I need to be patient. I'm not very patient. So when we start to assess our workforce capabilities, we have to start with looking at the resources that we have, our available training facilities that can be used, other educational programs, and then we need to kind of look at the gaps between what do we have and where do we need to go to have a highly successful nuclear energy program. One of the key things that needs to be thought about as well is what organization is going to be the owner-operator. I'll talk about how that worked in the UAE in a little bit. And then how are we going to recruit for those key organizations? There's certain organizations, and Eric mentioned some of these, the regulator, the owner, developing a safety culture, things that need to be put into place earlier than some of the other recruiting and capabilities that need to be developed. And then finally, sensitivity analysis. So the terminology maybe is a little bit confusing, but with that we're looking at if we're planning on building one large unit and then we decide to build 4 small modular reactors instead, how is that going to change our workforce needs? Is it going to, how sensitive is that change, or how sensitive is our workforce to that change? Is it going to need to be, a totally different workforce, or will it be similar to what we're already planning on? We need to know how changes in direction will impact the ultimate size of the workforce, and is it a change that we can pivot to and adapt to or not? So one of the exciting opportunities is that there's a lot of commonalities between a nuclear workforce and some other workforces. There's a lot of commonalities in construction. There may be other opportunities where, like in fossil fuel energy, where they have already pipe fitters and welders and some of the other capabilities that are needed for nuclear energy as well. But there's also some very special and unique characteristics of nuclear energy as compared to all other forms of energy production. And that is those nuclear engineers. Other industries don't need those, and they are very specialized. And other things like operators, radiological workers, there are certain things that we need or we need more of. And then the quality assurance and safety culture really requires a lot of time and training to be able to develop those programs. And so I'm glad in the campaign perspective that you're already working on that. That's great. So when we think about the recruiting life cycle, it really is a cycle. We need to be thinking about who's coming in, who's leaving, are there other opportunities, are we bringing in enough people to address things like people moving to other industries or retiring or other forms of attrition. So we need to set up these pipelines of education and vocation and bring them in. One of those special and unique things with the nuclear industry, there's these green boxes where even if a worker comes in that's already trained to be a welder, for example, when they come to a nuclear plant, they still need additional training on what's different about being a welder at a nuclear plant. What is special and unique about that? And that, it could be a one-day training orientation, but there's always some sort of training that needs to happen for everyone. I learned last time, I'm going to be patient and not hit the buttons again. All right, skills matrix. Has anybody heard of this? Show of hands. Anybody heard of the skills matrix? Oh, I see. Oh, okay, those are my colleagues, so we're going to fix that. All right, so this is a tool. This is a tool and a framework that you can use. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. It's just something that I wanted to introduce that you can bring back and potentially use in the future. And it's used to map the skills and level of competency that employees will need in different jobs as part of that workforce development. So it can really provide an excellent overview of the skills and competencies that are available in the workforce, as well as things that may be missing and need to be focuses of recruiting efforts. So this is a little example of what, like a pipe fitter, a template for a skills matrix. And I'll show you one that is filled out. Send my slides, sorry. So this is just a relatively simple one for a pipe fitter, and it talks about all the things that a pipe fitter might need to do as far as their duties and responsibilities. But I think the really important part here is what are the required skills and abilities, and what is the education and experience that they need in order to fill that role. So once these things are created and developed for the industry, they can be used over and over again to help. I wanted to see a nuclear plant start up for the first time myself. We were all very passionate about making sure that the project was successful. Ultimately, I do think it did help the project to be able to be completed more quickly. A wonderful project to be a part of and to experience that and have that opportunity to work with all these different nationalities that were all very excited and enthusiastic about nuclear energy and getting the project developed and built. Thank you for the question. We have other questions. Yes, over here. And then we'll go over here, yes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Simon Lucado, is Kenyan Director, Research to Empower, and I think I have a ton of questions, but otherwise I'll just try to cover what we can cover. So, this idea is all great, and my major question is, Kenya, being a country that is faced with a lot of corruption, what steps will be taken to ensure transparency, accountability in Kenya's nuclear energy program, in case of you're going to engage with the stakeholders in Kenya, in terms of procurement and operation, also to deal with matters conflicting interests. Another question is that how does Kenya plan to ensure the safe and secure operation of nuclear power plants in the face of potential natural disasters or security threats? Have you maybe considered maybe implementing climate disaster risk financing and insurance? Maybe you could tell us. Also, another reason is that maybe people may not be willing to uptake the idea of nuclear is because people don't have confidence in the government on delivering such initiatives. Because many great ideas have come before, but they have all languished. Kibera has the largest number of NGOs. So, another question is that you haven't touched really. How does Kenya plan to integrate nuclear energy into existing energy grid and infrastructure? I think that is a missing link because you don't start from scratch, right? You start from somewhere. So how are all these going to be integrated? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And let me start with the easier one, which is the last one. We operate using a national master plan, which we call the East Coast Power Development Plan. And therefore, nuclear as a source of energy has been integrated in our national energy plan from 2011. This national energy development plan is updated every 2 years. The current East Coast Power Development Plan that we have is for 2024-2044. And in that particular plan, nuclear as a source of energy has already been committed to come on board by the year 2034. So it is planned for nationally, and it is a committed source of energy. In addition to other sources of energy like hydro, solar, wind, geothermal, as you're aware, we have a lot of deposits of geothermal. And that is a baseload for our country. And nuclear is going to form the second baseload by the year 2034. So all this is planned for and integrated very well. And that's what guides our commissioning date in terms of deployment of the nuclear power program. In terms of safety and security, and this has been talked about all the time. If you look at the 19 infrastructure issues, which as a country is what we have been evaluated on, we have been told that in the year 2016, we had our first INEO mission, Integrated Nuclear Review Mission, that looks at how we have been able to perform in all those 19 infrastructure issues. And one of them is safety, security, and safeguard. Those three S's form part and parcel of those 19 infrastructure issues. And as a country, you must demonstrate how you'll be able to ensure that you deploy your nuclear power plant in a secure, in a safe, and optimal manner. So this is what the country is developing on this infrastructure to ensure that there will be no issues to do with those three S's in the future. In terms of corruption, I think this is all for us to answer that question. Corruption starts with you. It's a mindset issue. I think if we, all the laws in this, we have very good laws in this country tackling corruption. We have very good institutions in this country tackling corruption. But corruption is a mindset that all of us require to deal with. But I can assure you, in terms of the nuclear industry, that will not suffice. Because an accident in Kenya becomes an accident all over the world. And safety, security, and safeguard must be ensured. And no vendor will come into a country and compromise the quality that will actually derail that particular process. So for corruption, it's all of us to deal with that corruption. Even at your own place of work, at home, you need to ensure that we don't condone this particular vice. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is David Otuoma. I have only two questions, one for our host and another one for our visitor. So I think I'll start with our host. So we are very privileged that you explained, we had about education. This is my question. We have relationships with Korea, we have relationships with China, and also you say the Institute of Nuclear Science, the University of Nairobi. But you forgot one. In 2011, we started with the Texas A&M University of the United States, and every year we had agreed with Texas A&M University we'll be sending their Kenyans. Actually, the first year in 2012 we sent 30 Kenyans, and we're supposed to continue sending more Kenyans. And the reason why I'm saying that there's a state university in North Carolina. It has a pulsatile reactor. So there was an internet reactor lab arrangement between North Carolina and Jordan. And that program made the International Atomic Energy Agency start something called International Reactor Lab. And in Kenya now we are privileged, Kenyatta University is having that. So since we are privileged to have so many Americans here, because I've had, like now for example, I've been privileged to be made the first president of the Nuclear Society of Kenya, which was registered last month. Why don't we with the Americans so that we get more of our young people, while still here in Kenya, having access to reactor. That is on the side of research reactor. And on the side of this industry readiness, what we assisted with Texas A&M, you expand it because in America, between
And I think that's a really wonderful way to round out the session. And I just want to reflect back to Alicia Duncan's words, Staff Duncan's words at the beginning of the session for the young people that are here about mentors. I would not be standing up here and